Tonight, the royal family stands under a cloud of tension as a revelation shakes the foundations of Windsor itself. Princess Anne, known as the most dutiful and disciplined member of the monarchy, has delivered what sources describe as a final ultimatum, a direct request for Queen Camilla to return jewels belonging to the late Queen Elizabeth II. This is not a minor disagreement over heirlooms. This is a battle over legacy, heritage, and the very symbols that define Britain's monarchy. According to insiders, the conflict began quietly after Queen Elizabeth's passing in 2022. Within weeks of the transition, a discreet audit of the royal collection uncovered anomalies. Items that should have been accounted for were missing. At first, palace officials downplayed the findings, citing clerical confusion during a chaotic period. Yet whispers grew louder. Trusted archivists noted inconsistencies in the tracking logs. Personal pieces of the late Queen, many with historical and sentimental value, were nowhere to be found. Among the missing items, a diamond flower brooch once gifted by Queen Victoria before her coronation, a sapphire necklace worn to symbolize the strength of the Commonwealth, and a pearl tiara linked to pivotal diplomatic events. These were not simply ornaments. Each item carried meaning, representing decades of continuity, duty, and sacrifice. When word of these irregularities reached Princess Anne, the atmosphere changed. The Princess Royal, long regarded as steadfast and incorruptible, took the matter into her own hands. Unlike others in the family, she had no patience for excuses or ambiguity. For Anne, the disappearance of her mother's personal jewels was not about wealth. It was about loyalty. It was about honoring promises and protecting the monarchy's story. Behind the calm exterior that has defined her public persona for decades, Anne harbored quiet determination. She requested reports, questioned aides, and reconstructed movements of the collection in the final months of Elizabeth's reign. Her suspicion intensified when attention turned toward Camilla, the new queen consort. Aides reported unusual behavior, unrecorded movements of jewelry, private gatherings where pieces were displayed without official documentation, and unexplained delays in transferring items into the Royal Collection Trust. While no single incident proved wrongdoing, together they painted a troubling picture. Then came the testimony that turned rumor into crisis. A former personal assistant to Camilla, who had resigned months earlier, approached confidants with claims of a hidden vault at Balmoral House, Camilla's private residence in Wiltshire. According to this insider, several of the Queen's jewels were secretly moved there under restricted access, far away from Windsor or Buckingham Palace. The assistant insisted this was not gossip. They described the vault's layout, its security system, and even listed items they had personally seen. The emerald and diamond choker famously worn by Elizabeth, a sapphire brooch never catalogued after 2022, and a pearl tiara last spotted at a diplomatic gala years earlier. Their words struck a chord with Anne, who recognized each artifact as part of her mother's carefully curated legacy. For Princess Anne, the matter could no longer be dismissed as administrative error. This was deliberate. This was personal. And so, in a move that startled those closest to the crown, Anne acted. She discreetly enlisted trusted members of the Royal Protection Command to verify the claims. Operatives, under the guise of routine security reviews, investigated Balmoral House. What they discovered left no room for denial. A private vault, stripped of official tracking numbers, holding antiques that belonged to Queen Elizabeth. Logs had been deleted, access records erased, but photographs and cross-referenced inventories confirmed what Anne had feared. The jewels were there, concealed, misfiled, and misrepresented. The findings were placed in a binder, evidence too solid to ignore. With the truth in hand, Anne prepared for confrontation. The battleground would not be the newspapers or the court of public opinion. It would be Clarence House, where she intended to confront Camilla directly, face to face. The meeting was unannounced, the mood charged with silence and anticipation. Camilla, caught unprepared, attempted to dismiss Anne's accusations as unfounded, yet Anne was relentless. She spoke firmly, presenting the binder, photographs, statements, inventory lists. Her voice, calm yet unyielding, echoed with the authority of someone who had nothing to prove except the truth. Camilla faltered. Defensive explanations spilled out, misfiling, clerical oversight, chaos during the Queen's passing. But her eyes betrayed unease. The evidence was overwhelming, the excuses fragile. Anne pushed further, reminding Camilla that these jewels were not trophies to be locked away. They were symbols of a reign, heirlooms promised to future generations, and sacred ties to a monarch who served her people for 70 years. Anne's words cut deeper than accusations. She declared, "Respect is not inherited, it is earned. These treasures are not yours to claim. They belong to the crown, to history, and to the people." The ultimatum was clear: return the jewels, or face exposure. At that moment, Clarence House stood still. Camilla did not answer. She did not yield, but nor could she deny the truth laid before her. The silence marked the beginning of a fracture that would widen across the family, a crisis threatening to overshadow the new reign itself. And as Princess Anne left Clarence House, sources say her message was unambiguous. The monarchy could withstand scandals, it could survive loss, but it could not endure betrayal of its legacy. What followed next would test not only Anne's resolve, but the very balance of power inside the palace. For the Queen Consort, silence was not surrender, it was strategy. In the hours following that confrontation at Clarence House, the royal family entered a phase of concealed warfare. Behind gilded doors and velvet curtains, loyalties shifted and whispers filled the halls. Princess Anne had made her position unmistakable, but Queen Camilla was not prepared to retreat. Sources close to the palace revealed that within hours of Anne's departure, Camilla went directly to King Charles. She bypassed her advisors, preferring an intimate meeting that framed the clash not as a matter of missing heirlooms, but as a personal attack. Her tone, according to insiders, was sharp yet emotional. She painted Anne's intervention as humiliation, not justice, calling it an ambush staged to erode her dignity as Queen Consort. For Charles, already strained by the burden of a modernizing monarchy, the conflict could not have come at a worse time. On one side stood his sister, the most dependable defender of their mother's legacy. On the other, his wife, the woman who had stood by him through decades of controversy. The king found himself trapped between duty and devotion. Camilla's narrative was persuasive but strategic. She warned that Anne's accusations, if exposed, would trigger a media storm beyond repair. Headlines about hidden vaults, stolen jewels, and fractured trust could dismantle the monarchy's carefully managed image. She told Charles that protecting the dignity of the crown meant shielding her from scrutiny. But beneath the pleas lay calculation. Advisors soon circulated a draft decree that, if approved, would reduce Anne's ceremonial responsibilities. It recommended removing her from prominent duties, even suggesting her exclusion from future Order of the Garter ceremonies, an honor that carried deep symbolic weight. This was not administrative reshuffling, it was a direct strike against Anne's standing. Inside Buckingham Palace, reactions were divided. Some senior courtiers, fearful of Camilla's growing influence, stayed silent. Others questioned the motives behind such drastic measures, quietly pointing out that the draft targeted the very figure who had spent her life representing the crown without scandal. The seeds of division spread, and with them came instability. Amid this turmoil, a private message reached Anne. It came from Prince William, the heir to the throne, who chose his words carefully. "Be cautious," he warned. "This conflict is larger than it appears." William stopped short of public allegiance, but his gesture carried weight. Observers noted that his alignment with Anne signaled more than familial sympathy. It suggested the heir saw her fight as part of safeguarding the monarchy's future. Anne, however, was not swayed by threats of losing ceremonial power. Instead, she saw clarity. For her, The dispute was not about personal standing or prestige. It was about truth, about preventing history from being rewritten through manipulation. The jewels were symbols of integrity, not bargaining chips in palace politics. Yet as Anne held firm, new revelations surfaced. Deep within the royal archives, a sealed letter written by Queen Elizabeth II was discovered. In it, the late Queen detailed her intentions for specific heirlooms. The sapphire necklace was to be preserved for Princess Charlotte, symbolizing continuity across generations. Other pieces carried similar destinies, linking past to future. Most significantly, the letter named Anne as custodian of these heirlooms, praising her devotion and understanding of legacy's true weight. The discovery changed the atmosphere. No longer was Anne's claim based solely on suspicion and investigation. It was anchored in the Queen's own words, a testament of trust written before her passing. For palace advisors, the letter was a turning point. Many who had doubted Anne now recognized her authority. But outside palace walls, the story did not remain contained. Details of the dispute leaked into the press. Newspapers hinted at missing jewels, vaults, and quiet feuds among the royals. While Buckingham Palace issued measured statements to calm speculation, public sentiment began to shift. Commentators questioned why jewels tied to Queen Elizabeth's legacy were absent from official records. Attention turned to Camilla, whose public image was suddenly clouded with suspicion. Camilla responded not through statements but through symbolism. At a charity event, she appeared wearing a brooch long rumored to be missing, presenting it as if nothing had ever been amiss. To her supporters, it was proof that whispers were exaggerated. To her critics, it was confirmation that the jewels had indeed been kept away from proper oversight. Anne's answer was subtle but powerful. At a veterans' memorial, she wore no grand jewels, no spectacle. Instead, she delivered a speech that emphasized honor, service, and respect. Observers noted the contrast. Camilla relied on adornment. Anne embodied the values those adornments were meant to represent. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Prince Harry watched events unfold from California. Isolated from royal life yet tied by blood, he reached out privately to Anne. In their conversations, he recalled his mother Diana's warnings. Heirlooms had a way of disappearing when titles shifted. Harry even shared letters and details of a pearl bracelet once belonging to Diana that had mysteriously vanished. His words gave Anne further resolve, connecting her mission not just to Elizabeth's legacy but also to Diana's memory. The stage was set for escalation. Anne now possessed evidence, a sealed letter, and moral authority. Camilla, feeling cornered, leaned further on influence and politics. The monarchy itself braced for confrontation that could no longer remain private. And so, at Balmoral Castle, the Queen's beloved retreat in Scotland, the two women were set to meet again. What had begun as whispers about missing jewels had grown into a reckoning that would define not just their relationship, but the credibility of the monarchy itself. Balmoral Castle, often a sanctuary from the pressures of London, became the scene of a confrontation that few imagined possible. Princess Anne, resolute and measured, arrived with the weight of evidence and the authority of her mother's final letter. Queen Camilla, still clinging to her position as consort and partner to the king, prepared her own defense. The air was heavy with unspoken tension, and those present sensed history was about to turn. The meeting was private, yet its echoes reached far beyond the castle walls. Sources recount that Anne began with a calm but piercing declaration. The jewels were not personal keepsakes, they were part of the crown's legacy. To withhold them was to deny both history and duty. She placed the Queen's letter on the table, the inked words of Elizabeth II, a silent but commanding witness. Camilla's expression shifted. For the first time, she faced not just Anne's accusations, but the explicit will of the late monarch herself. Camilla attempted deflection, suggesting once more that clerical confusion explained the jewel's absence. But Anne pressed forward, citing the vault at Raymil House, the photographic evidence, and the testimonies of staff. Her voice did not waver. Those who observed described it as less a quarrel than a reckoning. Anne was not pleading, she was delivering judgment. The weight of proof was overwhelming. At last, Camilla conceded, reluctantly, conditionally. She agreed the heirlooms would be returned, but only if the matter remained private, away from headlines and scandal. Anne accepted the return but made it clear, secrecy would not erase the truth. The jewels would be restored, but trust had been irreparably broken. What followed was swift and decisive. Items once hidden reappeared in the official collection: the emerald choker, the sapphire brooch, the pearl tiara. Curators confirmed their return, though records of their disappearance remained a subject of quiet debate. The palace presented this as a routine reconciliation of archives, but those close to the family knew it was the result of Anne's ultimatum. Public perception, however, was less forgiving. Reports of tension spread through the press, and although palace spokesmen denied division, commentators noted the shift in tone. Camilla's appearances grew more guarded, her gestures more defensive. In contrast, Anne's image as guardian of her mother's legacy soared. She became, in the eyes of many, the embodiment of discipline, duty, and integrity, the very qualities Elizabeth had cherished. King Charles, caught between loyalty to his sister and devotion to his wife, was said to be unsettled, yet even he could not ignore the clarity of Elizabeth's written words. To side against Anne would have meant disregarding his mother's will. Advisers urged reconciliation, but the fissure remained. The monarchy had been preserved, yet not without scars. Prince William's quiet support of Anne became more visible in subsequent weeks. In speeches and appearances, his emphasis on continuity and respect for heritage echoed her language. Observers interpreted this as alignment, a generational passing of values from grandmother to daughter to grandson, preparing the path for Princess Charlotte, to whom the sapphire necklace had been promised. Meanwhile, Prince Harry, though distant, found his bond with Anne strengthened. Their correspondence, rooted in shared memories of Diana, underscored a broader theme, that legacy was not only about jewels, but about truth, honesty, and protection of family history from distortion. In the end, Anne emerged not as a rebel but as a custodian of order. She had defended her mother's memory and forced accountability where few dared. Camilla retained her title, but her authority was diminished, her credibility wounded by shadows of doubt. The jewels, though safely returned, bore a new story of conflict, of confrontation, and of one woman's refusal to let history be rewritten. The crisis revealed an enduring truth. Crowns and titles may pass with ceremony, but respect, once fractured, is slow to heal. And in this battle for legacy, it was Anne who stood firm, ensuring that the memory of Queen Elizabeth II remained untarnished by secrecy or ambition. The aftermath of Balmoral did not settle into silence. Instead, it rippled across the monarchy, reshaping its internal balance. While the jewels had been returned to the royal collection, the question of integrity remained unresolved. For Princess Anne, the battle was never simply about objects of gold and stone. It was about honesty, loyalty, and the sacred duty that came with preserving the legacy of her mother. Camilla, though outwardly composed, struggled under the weight of suspicion. In public appearances, she wore the jewels less frequently, aware that every brooch or tiara would invite scrutiny. Commentators noted her body language, the tightness of her expression, the caution in her gestures. While she maintained the posture of a queen consort, her aura of confidence had weakened. Within the palace, divisions deepened. Senior courtiers whispered of Anne's unshakable authority, recognizing that her confrontation had preserved the monarchy's credibility. Others, aligned with Camilla, quietly expressed frustration that the queen consort's influence had been diminished. The household split into unspoken camps, with each event, each ceremony, becoming a test of loyalty. King Charles sought to ease the fracture, urging unity. Yet his words carried less weight than his actions. Observers noted his visible closeness to Camilla, but his reluctance to challenge Anne. The late Queen's letter had tied his hands. To dismiss Anne's role would be to disregard his mother's wishes, a step he could not take without alienating both family and public. Meanwhile, Anne carried herself with her characteristic composure. She did not seek public vindication, nor did she parade the victory. Instead, she immersed herself in duties, representing the monarchy at memorials, charities, and official functions. Her presence conveyed stability, a reminder that in times of doubt, service and constancy outweighed spectacle. But the press was relentless. Headlines asked who truly controlled the monarchy's symbols. Editorials praised Anne as the guardian of the crown, while others criticized the secrecy that had allowed such a dispute to fester. Public opinion tilted sharply. Polls indicated rising respect for Anne, while Camilla's approval faltered. For a monarchy already under scrutiny, the optics were dangerous. It was in this climate that William stepped forward with greater clarity. During a visit to Scotland, he referenced the importance of protecting what has been entrusted to us, not for ourselves, but for those who come after. The statement, though general, was interpreted as an endorsement of Anne's actions. Analysts saw in William's words the outline of a monarchy that valued transparency and legacy over private ambition. Harry, though distant, added another layer to the unfolding drama. From California, he sent Anne documents and personal letters of Diana's, reflecting his mother's fears that heirlooms could vanish under the weight of politics. One piece in particular, a missing pearl bracelet once belonging to Diana, underscored his point. Anne listened carefully, acknowledging Harry's pain, yet reminding him that their shared goal was not vengeance but preservation. As these alliances formed, Camilla attempted to regain ground. At a high-profile charity gala, she appeared in a tiara that had once sparked speculation. She smiled, greeted dignitaries, and tried to project normalcy. Yet the gesture backfired. Commentators criticized it as performative, a tone-deaf attempt to reclaim authority through symbols rather than substance. Anne's contrast was striking. At a military commemoration days later, she wore no extravagant jewels. She spoke instead of sacrifice, resilience, and the duty to remember. The audience responded with quiet respect. Analysts noted that where Camilla leaned on ornament, Anne relied on values. The difference resonated deeply with the public. Behind the scenes, palace staff confirmed that the returned jewels had been secured, catalogued, and placed under stricter oversight. The Royal Collection Trust tightened procedures, ensuring no single individual could move artifacts without proper records. The lesson of Balmoral had reshaped protocols, embedding Anne's insistence on accountability into the institution itself. The fracture between Anne and Camilla, however, could not be so easily repaired. They continued to appear side by side at official events, their smiles polite but strained. To the public, their presence together suggested unity. To those within the palace, it was clear that trust had collapsed. In the eyes of many, Anne had triumphed. She had defended her mother's legacy, preserved the monarchy's credibility, and forced the return of priceless heirlooms. But victories in the royal arena rarely come without cost. For the institution itself, the episode left a lingering shadow, an unspoken reminder that even within the walls of palaces, betrayal and duty collide. The monarchy had survived the storm, but not unchanged. And for those watching closely, the question remained: had this been a battle won, or the opening of a deeper struggle yet to come? The storm that began with whispers of missing heirlooms ended with the jewels returned, but the echoes of that confrontation still reverberate through the monarchy. Princess Anne, steadfast and unwavering, stood as the victor in a battle that was about far more than diamonds or pearls. It was about loyalty, about truth, and about the preservation of a 70-year reign that defined an era. For Anne, the outcome was never measured in titles or headlines. It was measured in the protection of legacy. The emerald choker, the sapphire brooch, the tiara of pearls, each piece now sits safely within the royal collection, restored to its rightful place. Yet their meaning has changed. They no longer speak only of the late Queen's reign. They now tell the story of a daughter's defiance, of her refusal to let ambition eclipse history. Observers note that the crisis reshaped the monarchy's internal order. Anne emerged not only as the moral custodian of her mother's memory, but also as a figure whose influence rivals those of the throne itself. Her authority does not come from a crown or title, it comes from integrity, from decades of service, from the unyielding discipline that has made her the monarchy's most respected member. For the public, this was confirmation of what many had long believed, that Princess Anne is the embodiment of stability within an institution often shaken by scandal. Queen Camilla, by contrast, carries the burden of suspicion. Though she retains her position beside Charles, her credibility has been scarred. Every appearance, every gesture, is now weighed against Balmoral's reckoning. While some supporters urge forgiveness, public opinion remains cool. Analysts describe her as a consort diminished, present in title, absent in trust. The episode has altered her relationship with the nation, and even with those inside the palace. She may have survived the confrontation, but her influence is now fragile, her authority questioned with each passing day. King Charles continues his balancing act, seeking stability in a household divided by memory and power. Yet even he cannot ignore the clarity of his mother's words, written in her final letter. Anne's role as guardian of the jewels is secure, not because she demanded it, but because Elizabeth foresaw it. The king's silence on the matter speaks volumes. He may share his throne, but he cannot dismiss his mother's wishes. For many within the palace, it is Anne's steady hand, not Camilla's ceremonial presence, that truly upholds the memory of the queen who reigned before him. Prince William's alignment with Anne has only grown stronger. In public remarks, his emphasis on heritage and continuity mirrors hers, signaling a future monarchy that will prioritize duty over spectacle. His quiet recognition of Anne's fight is also a message to the nation. The next generation understands the weight of legacy. For William, this alignment is more than strategy, it is inheritance. He knows that one day he will carry the crown, and by echoing Anne's values, he signals the kind of king he intends to be. Even Harry, far from the palace, found renewed connection through the ordeal. His contribution, the letters, the reminders of Diana's warnings, tied the struggle to a larger story of truth and memory. Though estranged from the institution, he too became part of the defense of legacy. In his exchanges with Anne, he spoke of Diana's fear that heirlooms would vanish into private hands, severed from their symbolic meaning. His voice added a layer of poignancy to the conflict, reminding the family that jewels are not simply ornaments but touchstones of identity. As for the public, their judgment was decisive. Polls and commentary framed Anne as the protector of the crown, the embodiment of duty untainted by ambition. Her triumph was not only within the walls of Balmoral, but in the hearts of those who saw in her the values they once associated with Elizabeth herself. Commentators noted that Anne's victory restored a measure of faith in the monarchy. In an age when institutions are questioned, Anne proved that service and honesty can still triumph over maneuvering and politics. The jewels have been restored, but the episode has left an indelible mark. Trust fractured is not easily healed. Camilla may continue her role, but Anne's shadow looms larger. For the monarchy, the lesson is sharp. Authority without respect is fragile, and respect is earned not by possession but by service. The jewels are symbols, yes, but the true power lies in what they represent: continuity, honor, and sacrifice. Without those, even the brightest diamond is reduced to decoration. Anne's handling of the crisis has become a case study in quiet strength. She did not storm into the press, nor did she court attention. She acted with precision, gathering evidence, presenting proof, and demanding accountability. In doing so, she reminded both the family and the public that duty is not about pageantry but about responsibility. For her, the confrontation at Balmoral was not victory for its own sake. It was the fulfillment of a promise made to her mother, a promise to guard what mattered most. In contrast, Camilla's response revealed a dependence on appearance. She tried to reclaim authority through jewels, through the display of symbols, rather than through action. The difference was stark, and the public saw it clearly. Where Anne stood for values, Camilla leaned on adornment. Where Anne carried silence with strength, Camilla carried silence with defensiveness. The contrast has left its mark, and it may define how history remembers them both. In the final analysis, the saga of the missing jewels became more than a scandal. It became a test of loyalty, of integrity, of the balance between tradition and ambition, and in that test, Princess Anne proved herself the unshakable guardian of her mother's reign. As the royal family moves forward, the jewels glitter once more in their rightful cases. But their brilliance now carries a new weight, a reminder etched into history. Crowns may pass, but legacy belongs to those who protect it. And in this chapter of Windsor's story, it was Anne, calm, determined, and uncompromising, who protected it best.